Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. First, I want to welcome everybody to the second of the sessions of question and answers according to the school of Imam Shafi'i. May Allah have mercy upon him and on all of our scholars. Inshallah, so without further ado, we'll begin the session. So we'll just say Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah, Rabbi yassir wa a'in ya kareem. May Allah give us tawfiq and success in what is pleasing to him. Ameen. So we had a question that's already popped up. It says, Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh. Which musical instruments are allowed within the Shafi'i madhab? Firstly, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Musical instruments, we dealt with this question in the last, the first question and answer session. So if you want to just go back to that, I don't know whether it's in the middle or the end or whatever it was, but I kind of went into a little bit of detail in there. But in short, just to give a very quick short answer, the only instrument that is allowed in the Shafi'i school is the drum, and that is all drums apart from one particular drum, the one which has a narrow stem and a wide head. So wide head and a narrow stem, that drum is not allowed in the Shafi'i school. Apart from that drum, every other drum is allowed in the Shafi'i school to be used on whatever occasion. It's not limited to a particular occasion. And there's a difference of opinion with regards to the flute, but the strongest opinion in the Shafi'i school is that the flute is not permitted to use. So every other musical instrument is not allowed in the Shafi'i school apart from the drum, and the only exception to the drum is that one which I mentioned, which we call in Arabic the kuba, a large bass and a narrow stem. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. So again, I've put the link to the first Q&A in the chat. So if the brother wants to refer to that, it'll be more detail there, inshallah. And just like to remind the viewers that they can ask their questions in the live chat. Shaykh, on social media, we've had a few questions. So if you could address those. And it's to do with moon sighting. So Ramadan's around the corner, so these questions always pop up. So the first one is, how does local sighting work in the Shafi'i madhab?
Okay, Bismillah. So the term, we have to be careful of the term local sighting, because this term can be misunderstood and people may interpret it in different ways. We need to go back to how the scholars understand in fiqh what is local sighting and what is global sighting. So the definition in the Shafi'i school of a local sighting, we call this matla'. And the term is called matla' in the Shafi'i school. So the scholars differ over whether the difference of matali', which is the plural of localities, the ikhtilaf al-matali' has an effect on, or the difference of localities has an effect on moon sighting or not. So in the Shafi'i school, we say yes. If there are difference in localities, and the term in Arabic is called matali', if there is a difference in matali', in localities, then this will affect the moon sighting or the moon sighting for Ramadan, for the beginning and end of Ramadan. What is a matla' or what is a locality? Here the scholars, they went into a little bit of a discussion over this, but in short, the strongest opinion in the Shafi'i school is that the matla', the locality, is where the sunrise and sunset, anywhere where the sunrise and sunset are the same at the same time, that region will be called a locality. Okay, so a locality does not mean one city. It does not mean one country. It does not mean one what do we have in the UK? You use the term areas, okay, or regions. That's not the term. So get that away from your minds. In the Shafi'i school, regions, cities, villages, this has nothing to do with locality, although they are part and parcel of it, of course. But a locality in the Shafi'i school definition, according to the strongest opinion in the school, is that the locality is where sunrise, if sunrise and sunset take place at the same time, or at least around the same time, then anywhere within that region which has the same time of sunrise and sunset are deemed as one locality. Okay, so that will be called as a local sighting. So what does that mean? That means if the moon has been sighted anywhere within that region, by term region. So from now on, whenever I say region or locality in this answer, please refer back to my my definition, which I just gave about sunrise and sunset. That's what I mean by region and locality. So if the moon has been sighted, the new crescent moon has been sighted anywhere within that region, then it's an if there is a ruler, a Muslim ruler, then the person who has given testimony will come to the Muslim ruler, and the Muslim ruler will then give a judgment. Then that means that everybody within that region will be obliged to follow that. Anybody outside of that region, even if they are under the jurisdiction of that ruler, are not obliged by Sharia to follow that sighting. Okay, although if you're under the jurisdiction of a ruler, then there's something else that we need to bear in mind. But we're not talking about this now. The question I've just been asked is about what is local sighting. So local sighting in the Shafi'i school means that if the moon has been sighted in a region whereby if the sunset and sunrise are at the same time, then anywhere within that region is called a local sighting or a region, okay, or a matla. Now that affects many other things in the Shafi'i school in terms of, so someone might say, so what's the point of local sighting? Well, the point of local sighting is that if a person has seen the moon of Ramadan, then they go and tell a ruler, or in front of a judge, they bear testimony, and that judge establishes that anybody within that region will be obliged to follow that. That's the judge's statement or verdict. Anybody outside of that region is not obliged in the Shafi'i school. Okay, so that's very important. And I just want to mention one thing here, because people mention different things to me about this issue, especially bringing it into the context of the West. Morocco is not considered as a local sighting. They have a different sunrise and sunset. Okay, so people who want to follow, I'm not saying there's a problem with following Morocco or wherever you're going to follow, that's fine. But please don't say that this is a local sighting. This is not the Shafi'i school. So if you're following the Shafi'i school and you state that you're doing by local sighting, Morocco is not considered to be a local sighting. Okay. The scholars have gone into some discussion over distances. So when I've said sunrise and sunset, some of them have tried to give a distance, and I don't want to go into too much detail about this because there is this difference between the ulama. But in general, what has been seen is that anything around approximately a certain distance will be considered as one region. But I don't want to go into that detail. As long as the sunset and sunrise is the same or approximately the same, give or take 4 or 5 minutes or something like that, then that place will be considered as one region. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. Just to remind the viewers, you do have an answer with more details on the Islam Answers website, which I'll post in the live chat, inshallah, regarding what is considered local sighting. No, it's fine. I just think, obviously, we're short on time, so you can't go into much detail. And just on the same kind of line, Shaykh, another question we had on social media was, is the Saudi sighting based on calculations alone, or is it actual sighting? And maybe you might know, because obviously you're based in...
Yeah. So again, I don't know inside what's happening. Allahu alam. From what I'm aware of is that they have a committee that goes out and do moon sightings. That's as far as I know. I don't have inside information away from that. Now, again, Allahu alam. What do they base it on? What do they not base it on? I don't go into that detail. As far as I'm aware, that they do have a committee that go out to do moon sighting, and whether they rely on the calculations or not, I don't know. But if people have people must also understand that there are madhabs, including the Shafi'i school and the Hanbali school, that calculations are allowed for the establishment of months and also ending months. There's, in terms of negating testimonies, then there's a difference of opinion with regards to that. But just for people to bear that in mind, that there are madhabs, including the Shafi'i school, which allow the usage of calculations, certain level of calculations, to establish and end a month. Although the calculations do not make it in the Shafi'i school. Again, there's a longer answer on this if you'd like to see it. I've written it on Islam Answers. But calculations cannot make it binding upon the whole community. It is, however, what's the point of calculations? It allows the people who know how to use it and those who trust them to follow that if they believe that is correct. But it does not make it binding upon the people or the community to have to follow that if the ruler gives an answer, gives a verdict based on calculations. This is from the Shafi'i school. Whether the Hanbali school do the same thing, I don't know. Allahu
A'lam. Next question we have, I'll just put it on the screen.
Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. Shaykh, apart from Arabic, is there any reward in reading the Quran in another language, for example, English?
Recitation of the Quran, nothing will be considered as recitation of the Quran, and the reward of recitation of the Quran is in particular when it's read in the Arabic language, okay, because that is what's called Quran. The moment that it's taken out of that language and what you utter is no longer Arabic, then it will not carry that same reward. But is there reward, or is there any form of virtue in reciting or learning through the Quran? Then yes, there's this there. Then inshallah there will be a reward through this. I don't know what type of reward, but whether it would be considered to be within it will be within the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ about يتدارسون القرآن, when they learn Quran with each other. Whether that goes into this hadith, Allahu A'lam, but reading to understand the interpretation, etc., then there will be a great benefit for you, and obviously reward in this, because this is an act of virtue. But whether in terms of that particular reward of every letter having 10 rewards set to it, then that is only when what comes out of your mouth is the Arabic language, Quranic Arabic. I mean by the Quran itself, not tafseer, etc.
Wallahu a'lam. Next question is a follow-up on the first question, which is, if all drums are allowed in the Shafi'i madhab except that one you mentioned, then does that mean the dole is allowed? The dole is a double-sided barrel drum played mostly in South Asia.
I don't know what the dole is, but as I said, every drum in the Shafi'i school is allowed, apart from one particular drum which is called the kuba. And the kuba is a drum which, and I've seen this, unfortunately, this is probably the most common one that's been used. Out of all the drums that are there, this one's the one that's used more commonly, unfortunately. It has a narrow stem and a wide head. That is not allowed, okay? Anything that resembles this particular form of a drum, a narrow stem and a wide head, is not allowed, okay? As long if this says it's double-sided barrel drum, so I'm assuming it's just a barrel, 2 drums on the side, then that would be allowed. Wallahu a'lam.
So just remind the viewers, if they have any questions, please do ask in the live chat. One of the questions we had on social media was, what are the faraid or the fard of a wudu in the Shafi'i madhab?
Tamam. In the Shafi'i school, there are 6 fara'id of wudu, and just for people to understand, what does fard mean in the Shafi'i school? Mean these are obligations and fundamentals that if you omit any of these following 6, then your wudu is invalid. As in, you do not have wudu, you cannot do anything which would require you to do wudu, and your wudu would not be valid, and you'd have to make sure you have wudu. Okay, so number 1 is intention. One must intend to perform wudu, okay, or to do the fard of wudu, or lifting the impurity, okay, spiritual impurity. The second one is to this intention. I don't want to go into much, but so that's the first one, intention. Number 2, washing the face, everything that is about the face, and there's details with regards to that. Washing the arms, both arms, up from the finger to the elbow and including the elbow. That's the third. Wiping the head, okay, wiping part of the head, sorry. The obligation is to write a part of the head, such that if I just got my finger, tip of my finger, and wet it, and I went like this, that would suffice. Or even if I touched it, as long as it touched my head, that would suffice in the Shafi'i school. And then that's the fourth. The fifth one is to wash both feet from the toes to the ankle and including the ankle. And the sixth one is to make sure you do it in that order that I have just mentioned. Face, intention, face, arms, head, and feet. These are the 6 obligations of wudu in the Shafi'i school.
Okay, next question we have is, Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh. I wanted to know what is the strongest opinion about a woman going to a mosque for Taraweeh prayer?
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In the Shafi'i school, it's permitted for women to go to masajid to pray. There's no issues with that. The only issue that the madhab and in general that we hold as an issue is the journey going there and the safety for the woman, not just in terms of physical safety, but also in terms of her honorable safety, etc. And as long as there is no, which I'm sure there isn't, but as long as there is no fear or of mixing, etc., then it's permitted for a woman to pray Taraweeh in the masjid, although it is always better if the woman can to pray at home.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. Another question we had was, is it permitted to touch the Holy Quran without wudu, the mushaf?
In the Shafi'i school, it is not permitted to touch the Holy Quran without wudu. Okay, in the Shafi'i school, it's not permitted for a man or a woman to touch the mushaf, what we call the mushaf here, okay, without wudu. And mushaf in the Shafi'i school refers to that which is written in Arabic. Okay, if you have now this is another very important point. If you have it written in another language, if it's a translation, then that's not a problem. As long as the translation is greater in words than the Arabic, and as long as the Arabic is not like you have some pages that A4 that like, then you have the Arabic right there, as in an image of the Quran itself, and then in the borders you have the English translation there. That would be problematic according to some of our scholars. Okay, but if it's, for example, it's just translation, there's no Arabic inside, then that's fine, you can touch that. If it's a transliteration, meaning if it's written with Latin letters, but when you utter them, you're uttering Arabic. So Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, it's written not in Arabic, it's written in transliteration, Latin letters, then that would still be considered as Quran. You would not be allowed to touch that without wudu, because what you're uttering is Quran.
Just for my clarification, Shaykh, are you saying if it's say you have a tafseer book or a book which does contain part of the Quran, but as long as the English is more than the Quran, then it's okay?
Yes, that's the case. And as long as, according to one of our scholars, the issue is that if you imagine, there are some books of translation where they've got listed an image of the Quran itself, right? And then in the borders, they've got translation.
Yes.
That, according to one of our scholars, would say that would be a problem. So there's two opinions on that. One would say that would be considered as mushaf still, as in Quran. So regardless of that there's English there, it doesn't matter, it's still Quran. Whilst one of our other scholars say no, it would carry the same ruling as the other books, meaning that if the Arabic is less than the English, then it'll be fine. But as long as the Arabic, if the Arabic is more, then it'll be considered as mushaf. This will lead on to another question, but someone may come to this or not. The issue of mobile phones, Quran on mobile phones, mushaf on mobile phones. There is a difference of opinion on this issue with contemporary scholars, but the opinion that I personally go with is that the mobile phone, the mushaf on the mobile phone does not carry the same ruling as the normal mushaf. So if you don't have wudu, you may carry your phone even if you don't have wudu and recite, as in touch it, even with the image of the mushaf open. Wallahu alam.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. Another question we had says, Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh. Shaykh, is it allowed for a man to pray in congregation with his wife at home? And second part is, And would there be a situation where this may be recommended?
No, a good question. Yes, it is permitted for the man to pray in congregation with his wife at home. This answers the first question. Secondly, and would there be a situation where this may be recommended? Yes, in a situation where if for example, the wife is alone and she needs some company, and by the man not leaving, there may be a situation where the spouse needs a little bit of company, she needs some support or something around her, and if by the man not going to the masjid, it's not going to cause a congregation to be delayed, or people aren't going to be waiting for him or anything like that, then it'd be recommended for him to pray at home with his wife. Tamam? In that situation.
Another question we had was, in the Shafi'i madhab, how many rakat is Taraweeh?
In the Shafi'i madhab, Taraweeh, and I believe this is across all four madhabs, Taraweeh, as in the sunnah. What is the sunnah of Taraweeh? An established number. The sunnah, the established number of Taraweeh is 20 rak'ahs. 20 rak'ah, okay? That is the established sunnah. So if you look into the books of any of the four madhabs, they would tell you that the established sunnah of Taraweeh is 20 rak'ah, and you can't go above that. There's a debate over whether if you pray less than 20, is it considered Taraweeh or not? In the Shafi'i school, we have a difference of opinion on this, but the strongest opinion in the madhab is that even if you pray 2 rak'ah, it will be counted towards Taraweeh, okay? But 20 is like the perfection, basically. It's similar to, for example, when somebody prays duha prayer, after Fajr, when the sun has risen, and etc., when it's above the horizon by a spear's length, when you wait about 20-25 minutes, depending on the time of the season, duha prayer, people generally pray around 2 rak'ahs, okay? But duha can be prayed up to 8, and some say up to 11, but it can be prayed up to 8 rak'ahs, okay? So when you pray duha as 2, it counts as a duha, and you could pray up to 8, and it'll be counted as an 8, up to 8. Same with witr. Witr is 3, it can go up to 11, so on and so forth. Taraweeh, it's maximum, okay, and the sunnah is 20, okay? If you can achieve that, then that's excellent. If you cannot, if you pray 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, whatever you can do, then that will count towards Taraweeh, but it's not the perfection, which is 20.
The final question we had in was, is it permitted to pray wearing shoes or sandals or something of the like?
As long as the shoes, there's a few things to bear in mind. Firstly, there's no najasa on them. There's no impurity or filth on them. And the second thing to bear in mind is, in the Shafi'i school, the toes, there must be at least the sole of one of the toes, a part of the sole of one of the toes on each foot must be touching the ground. That's an obligation in the Shafi'i school, which means that your shoe or boot, whatever, or sandal needs to have some flexibility for it to bend, so that at least a part of the sole of one toe, as a minimum, on each foot must be touching the ground firmly, okay? If your shoe, your boot, your sole, sandal does not allow you to do that, then no, you cannot. The other thing is to also bear in mind, if you walk into a masjid with it, then that can be considered as disrespecting the masjid, which is haram, okay? So that could be another issue to bear in mind. But in terms of its permissibility, it's permissible with other things to bear in mind. Is it sunnah to do so? This is a question now. Someone may ask, is it a sunnah? And should we go that extra mile and go that further to pray in them? Then I haven't seen it being the case in the Shafi'i school.
We'll just take another person just asked a question. This will make the last one, inshallah. They just wanted clarification. Is that touching the ground at all times or during sujood? You mentioned that the toe.
The foot needs to always be on the ground. I don't understand what they mean by at all times. But when I say the question was about, yes, during sujood, yes, this must be during sujood. But even if you're in the salah, you must be standing on your feet if you're praying standing. Okay, your weight actually needs to be on your feet. If your feet are weightless, then your prayer is invalid, which leads on to many other issues.
Yeah, which we don't have time for now, inshallah. Next time, inshallah.
No, we don't.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh, for your time, and hopefully we can have you back next month, inshallah.
بإذن الله سيدي. جزاكم الله خير. بارك الله فيكم وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.